I'm excited about this episode of the Elite Recruiter Podcast. I have my awesome guest, James Dyson, who is the Head of Global DEI for Talent Acquisition at Boomi. He is here to talk about everything diversity recruiting. And we're not going to just talk about just like strategy. We're going to talk about how to actually bring on the talent and create an environment where they're going to actually stay and succeed. So, James, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on. It's always a pleasure to join.
Well, go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
How did you get into the wonderful world of recruiting?
You know, I think everybody's favorite story about recruiting, you trip and land in it. You know, nobody ever plans to be a recruiter. So, my story was a fitness trainer and living in DC. That doesn't pay enough bills. Back then, it's different now. It's different with social media now. But back then, I got into marketing, and then I had another connection, and they said you'd be great doing recruiting. And so I kind of got into agency recruiting, and I never got out of it since then. So that's the that's the 5-cent tour.
And now you're heading up diversity and inclusion over at Boomi. How's that?
It's doing good. Very excited. Boomi is we'll say a fairly new and old company at the same time. They were once a part of Dell, but now they've divested from Dell. And so it's a standalone organization. And Boomi's kind of global mission is to connect the world through their multiple API connectors and the systems that they're able to use to connect different, platforms and organizations within a company. So.
Okay, cool. And I've actually been seeing Boomi on a few resumes recently. So I was just like, interviewing James, I'm seeing Boomi on some resumes, and listeners know I'm in the cleared space. So there's always, who knows what their API is connecting to.
Right.
All right. So, what's your initial thoughts on the current environment for diversity and inclusion within the recruiting world?
I think, obviously in our current environment now, DEI and B, as they're, that's now the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. It's spiking up again. You had the first kind of big spike around the time of George Floyd's death. That a lot of companies did a lot of advertising. You saw a lot of Black Lives Matter slogans everywhere. And then I think people became keenly aware of the need for a DEI and B type of within their organization. I think now they've realized it's an economic driver. Also, as the new kind of university college generation kids are coming out, they're keenly aware of being in a more diverse organization, and they want it. So it's almost kind of something as a demand from college kids coming out. So companies need to take a better look at it rather than just being more tactical. They need to be more strategic about it. Okay.
Well, let's go ahead and just jump right in.
Okay.
What is the secret to hiring diverse talent?
Whether or not it's a secret, I think it's kind of like anything else. You got to be true to yourself. The first thing is not necessarily figuring out where is the talent and how do we go recruit them and how do we pull them out and how do we, I think a lot of companies get very tactical in their mindset about how we're going to go capture this talent. The answer is be a place that this talent wants to come. Do all of the things that you're proclaiming that your company does. That's the secret to diversity recruiting, is to be a diverse organization. They're going to want to come to you because you're doing these things. You're in the community of where they're seeing members of the company and corporations that look like them in different representations. So the best way to recruit talent is to recruit diverse talent is to be a diverse organization. I know that's sometimes a lot harder to do, but that's at least the first step. You got to start moving in that direction.
Now, when it comes to more on the tactical side, the communities, what are the good places to go find those communities to tap into?
Yeah, so there is, there's so many organizations that you can connect with, depending upon what you as an organization want to do. And I know we'll kind of talk about metrics a little bit later, but this is kind of where your metrics are your key drivers. Figuring out kind of your organization. What are you lacking? Are you lacking more women? If you have a sales department, you need more women in your sales department. Do you need more women from unrepresented minorities, or just more unrepresented minorities, period? That sets the tone for what you want to improve on, So that's your first step, is figuring out your current makeup and then saying, okay, we are missing a lot of these people. Where do I have to go to get these types of people? Okay. And I work with many amazing organizations through Boomi and kind of connecting, whether it's Latinas in tech, you have Black Girls Who Code, NSBE, SWE, the National Association of Women Sales Professionals. These are all different organizations that you can reach out to and connect with once you figure out what you want to do. And, and obviously there is, the colleges and universities that you want to reach out to, whether they're historically Black colleges, primarily women colleges, Hispanic Native colleges. You can go anywhere you want to go and find them, but you got to know what you're looking for first.
And that kind of goes into the next question. What's your thoughts on how to really actually recruit them?
Yeah, you got to be honest. When you go in there, it's one, showing up and being present. At whether it's events, whether they're doing conferences, for different associations. Whether if it's IT and technical kind of engineers holding hackathons, you're holding panels, talks, you're showcasing your product and the things that you can do with your company at their location, at their site. The biggest thing is going to them, going to their area and being present in their world. That one lets them know that you found them, you're interested in them, and two, you're willing to come to them. It's not always that, hey, I'm having this event, come, fly out to Illinois, or fly out to DC, fly out to wherever and come join us type of thing. I think the capability to be remote now is a lot better, but that's how you get them.
I mean, it's one of those things, if you're looking for a job within the next year or two, you're not going to, most of the time, unless it's like a large national event, you're just not going to fly out to maybe make a connection. And I've seen companies do that over the years. When it comes to people that apply or people that show up to an event, like a hackathon or something like that, those are people that want to grow. Those are just great ideas. You're right. Just being there is the greatest thing.
and being aware of also the area that you're going into, that it's understanding the diversity dynamics of being from an Atlanta to a DC to a Boston to a New Hampshire are way different dynamics than what you want to do. So if you're a company in those areas, in those markets, you can't be the same model. You can't use the same model in Atlanta that you do in New Hampshire. It's just not going to work because the types of candidates are not there. The same types of candidates are not there. So you have to understand your market as well and where you're going. So,
what's your thoughts on the impact of having corporate initiatives without corporate leadership?
Yeah, that's and I think that's the big piece. I think Accenture they wrote an article and it says kind of DEI initiatives kind of counteract the 2023 economic recession. That was kind of the title of their article. And they're basically outlining that companies are missing out on about $1 trillion worth of business by not being inclusive. And that the ability for a company to be more inclusive, to have better DEI goals, better DEI kind of internal structure and product, it starts with the leadership. It starts with the organization, because if the leadership of the organization isn't bought into it, it's never going to trickle down into the rest of the company. And it's hard in organizations to trickle up that mentality of like, we want to do this. But if leadership is very kind of bottom line focused, then, and I'll probably, if global heads of DEI and other DEI leadership and talent will probably tell you, because I've been on panels with them and they all nod their heads. It's like, the hardest thing is getting them to understand that DEI connects to the bottom line. Like there is a business argument for becoming a more diverse organization. Like it's there, but a lot of leaders struggle to understand that. Have their own reasons as to why, but that's the bridge. That's the bridge you got to overcome.
Okay. Well, and most of the time when you think of DEI, you think of just some group in HR. I hate to say that. But yeah. When you think of DEI, you think of a group in HR. How do you think DEI and DEIB fits within the talent structure?
So you think of it on kind of on the life cycle of DEI. So there is the natural, you have to recruit, you're recruiting in diverse talent. So there is the recruiting aspect of it. Now, once they get into the organization, what are you doing with them? Are you supporting them? Are you empowering them? Are you training them? So there's a development piece in there. And so you have the HR aspect of the HR development, the programmatic piece that is in there. But you're also using, whether they're employee resource groups, service groups, ERGs, you hear some companies talk about, they're doing community work, they're doing internal programs, they're doing different training modules for their types of groups. That becomes almost kind of a community outreach. That's the type of a branding and marketing that you're doing. So your marketing team is able to take this and then push it for outreach for other areas that you can draw talent back into. So it becomes this kind of, you touch talent, you touch HR, you touch the marketing division. It's a natural, just kind of programmatic group. So, your DEI is typically housed in HR talent because that's the main, a lot of people feel that that's the main focus of it. And that's okay. But you just have to understand that it's not just recruiting. It's not just HR. It's not just marketing. It's a combination of it all. And if you don't nourish it as that, you're going to miss all of those other areas.
So one of the things, if you try to do anything and if you want to succeed at anything, you have to be able to track it. Because if you don't track anything, like you just wandering around in a circle. Yeah. When it comes to like the importance of DEI and DEIB, why are metrics and creating metrics so important?
It's your baseline. It's your baseline for any and everything you want to do. It sets the standard for your strategy. It sets the standard for your goals, your targets that you want to achieve. It gives you your baseline for your life as for DEI and B, because that's everything that you're measured on. You want to have company want to see, we want to see our diversity numbers go up. Okay, well, what does that mean? Which diversity? Like overall? Like how are you? Because there's so many ways, and it's recruiters and HR people. It's like you can slice metrics and data however you want it to be, and it's always the question of what do we want to see? So you get a holistic overview of the company. how many women to men, how many unrepresented minorities you have to whites in the company. And then it goes from there, because then if you're a global organization, globally, different areas in different countries have different requirements. So if you take Boomi, for example, we're in APJ, so Asia, Pacific, Japan. In that area, Asians and Native Indians are not the minority. So that's not an area to push. Women in the workplace in those areas is the biggest areas that you want to drive that brings diversity into those areas. So it's understanding culturally how to do that, but then globally just the differences and how you want those numbers and how you want those metrics. But it sets everything up. If you don't have the right metrics, you can't go find the right people. You never know how many groups of the right people you want to bring in. What's your target? What's your retention rate? How are all of these programs that you're doing working effectively? So metrics is the most important thing.
I know it's, working with the metrics, and it's getting also managers, the hiring managers, to make the decisions too. So like recruiters, we can bring people to the door all day long,
right.
But many times we're not actually in charge of who's making the hire.
Correct.
I have seen this at a large government contractor I used to work at many years ago when I was a college recruiter for them. The hiring managers were actually, the VPs were bonused on hitting their diversity numbers. If they didn't hit their diversity numbers, they lost bonuses. But like outside of like a financial impact and outside of, something they should be doing, what are some ways to get, your partner hiring managers to, look at more diverse talent?
Yeah, I think it starts with training, so you have to get them to understand why it's important. And and we have to be realistic, at least kind of in America, of what we're dealing with. There is the understanding of there's a population in the country that's not that excited about diversity from that standpoint. And that's just being honest. And those individuals may be in place of being hiring managers. So sometimes it's going to take training and understanding in some areas. It may take more of a company mandated type of, on your performance review. Like if you're constantly, if you're never hiring anybody from a diverse background, then yes, this is going to impact you and your performance to the company. However that is, if it's financially, if it's more from a performance review, but it has some kind of meat to it. Like it has to be on people's radar. And I think that's the biggest thing of awareness, to say like, okay, I'm hiring, I want to hire the best person. That's always the end. That's always the end of the story. Because when you start targeting people for hire, then you get into discrimination. And you and I have talked about, it's like diversity recruiting in its name is discrimination. Like, I can't go out and just, I'm just going to go find black women. Well, now I'm discriminating against everybody else. So it's understanding, I'm going to go find the best talent, but I'm going to look into diverse pools of people to find the best talent in diverse pools. And that's the main kind of construct of understanding diversity recruiting. So, but managers, it has to be on their radar, and they have to have some skin in the game.
Well, before we jump into a bunch of other questions, I'd love to get your answer for this. If you're a recruiter, by yourself in an organization, your own firm or whatever, but you want to make an impact on, diversity recruiting and bringing in, people into the workplace, but, you're just the recruiter, you don't have what we'll say buy-in from leadership. You don't have buy-in from, like some of your clients, but you want to make an impact. How can you make an impact?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like as we mentioned before, finding those diverse pools. So take outside of, I will say there are some areas of recruiting that may be tough. Cleared recruiting, I mean, it's just being able to go out to diverse areas is hard in the cleared space. Really, because it's hard just to find clear people in general, let alone kind of a whole band. And you don't have, there's no organization. It's kind of, you don't have like a National Hispanic Cleared Individuals or the National Black Awareness, cleared people. They don't exist. So you have to build your network out. But I will say, for any kind of entry level roles or kind of 4 to 5 year roles, reach out to historically Black colleges, reach out to women colleges, reach out to any of the engineering organizations, NSBE, SWE, SHIP, and connect with them, because a lot of times, either for a small fee, price wise, that's really that may be the only hindrance is a lot of some of these organizations. It's like there's a cost to advertise and get talent from these areas. There's a lot of kind of unique tools, such as, Circa is a job posting tool that a lot of government contractors use, primarily because government contractors are required to post all of their positions in every state's unemployment office. So Circa is a tool that organizations can use to just blast it out. They do it for you, so you don't have to call into every state, because that's a pain. So they do yeoman's work in doing that, but also they push it out to a lot of smaller, diverse organizations as well too, and you can increase those organizations in their portfolio. So there are some tools that you can use there. If you do have at least a blessing of maybe, from a recruiter, talk to your recruiting manager to see if you can talk to some DEI consultancy groups, because they have in their kind of in their pocket either smaller organizations that they can tap into. They have pools of people that they could bring to the table for you. But that's the biggest thing that you can do as a recruiter is just dip into these other pools and try to find, more of those people in those areas from that standpoint.
Awesome. Well, let's switch gears, talk about a little more just on the recruiting side of the house.
Yeah.
You've been in recruiting for, 15 years now, 16 years? I think we're close to the same.
It's over 20.
Over 20. Sorry.
I was like 15. I was like, yeah, I would take that if I could take my age back.
What's your advice? You've led recruiters, you've been in recruiting. What's your advice on being an elite performer in recruiting?
Being an elite performer as a recruiter is somebody that can really, you've heard baseball, it's like that 5-tool player. Recruiters are a similar thing. So you're fantastic at sourcing, being able to source. I can find people. I can get them in. Your client management skills. Your managers trust you. Your managers will work with you. You can convince your managers a lot of times to make moves for certain candidates that normally they wouldn't move to. That's being able to do that. That changes recruiters' lives. Being able to talk them in that.
Well, that's where you go from recruiter to partner.
Right. Yeah. And then also being on your candidate side management. So also being able to work with your candidates, getting them to understand the role, getting them to understand what they really want. Not having candidates to kind of take you along on the ride and just kind of saying, well, I'm just kind of testing all of this just to see, it's recruiters get pulled on the chain from both directions there. And And then obviously, being able to close a candidate out, getting them to show up on day one, that's mission critical for it, because the position is never closed until the person shows up and sticks around for 2 months. And so, those are kind of the four main things. And then, and I will say for the fifth one is their ability to network and tap into a large pool of resources themselves. The more you as a recruiter can become your own database, the better off you are overall. So I guess those are my five tools for the lead recruiter.
That database that you make for yourself will carry you
forever. Yeah, absolutely.
Normally I'd like to ask the question is what advice would you give to like a new recruiter and an experienced recruiter? But I think you did a good job covering that in that question. So I'm going to switch it up for you.
Okay.
What's your advice to somebody that wants to get into a diversity and inclusion role that isn't?
Bring your lunch, because it's going to be a minute. I think the finding an organization that either has employee resource groups, if they have ERGs, if they have something that they're doing for diversity, finding kind of what that is, kind of start out volunteering, starting out kind of getting into it, find whatever your area of passion is in DEI. There are, a lot of times there are people who have different unrepresented minorities, them themselves are URM, and they just want to do something to make a difference. And I think being able to find that in an organization, volunteer, join different external organizations. I think finding whether it's boards or associations that are connected to what you are passionate about is a great way to develop more relationships with people who are kind of in that DEI field that you could link to a job, somewhere else. Because it will vary from company to company. Some companies have large DEI kind of organization and structures, and some company it's just your local recruiter who just happens to be concerned about it and is like, you know what, I'm gonna try to do a couple of things, but there's no real kind of no form of function, and that's a good question, because since I've taken over this role, I've had several people just reach out to me via LinkedIn, and it's like, how can I get into the DEI field? It's like, man, y'all are trying to, but that's good, and I feel very proud for those people and just for the area that they want to get into it, because if you can get into a company, you really can make an impact and make a difference, not only company wide, but just for your community and for, from a social justice standpoint.
Awesome. Great answer. And, I've seen multiple people ask that. So that's why I wanted to ask you. I was like, you know what? I have James on. This is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Just connect. Just, tell them reach out to me. We'll stay connected. And so.
And for listeners, I'll have James's LinkedIn profile in the show notes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
When it comes to, this is a question I ask everybody. Yeah. What is a book that has had a huge impact on your career?
There was a book a while ago. It's somewhere back there. I know, right? I'd have to look back there to find it. And it was called It's Not What You Know, It's Who You Know. And it's understanding from a business standpoint that it's not really what you know intellectually. It's being able to organize your thoughts, put things together. How much of a go-getter are you? And yes, you got to know something about the content. It's like not going to walk into like an aircraft company and be like, I'm going to fly this plane today. It's just, there has to be something. But there is something to that extent. And I think that's a lot of, what I've seen over the years is, being able to develop your network of people, and that will almost sometimes take you further. I was on a panel here recently, and one of the things we were talking about was degrees. Why is there a need for still degrees on job requisitions? And you're like, in a lot of IT, I know, it's a lot of, for a lot of IT roles. And if you think about it now, when I was dating myself, when I was in high school, vocational type skills were carpentry, plumbing, electrician, those type of skills. And they were like, those are the skills you could get a high school diploma with, get into the profession. You didn't need to go to college because you could do an apprenticeship with them. There's a lot of IT stuff that does the same now. You don't have to go to college to be a developer. You don't have to go to college to be a coder. You don't have to go to college to be a cybersecurity personnel. So it's almost like, why are you requiring them to go to college to do this work that doesn't necessarily require a degree? And that's, but again, that's, if you know somebody, you may not have a degree, but you can still get in there. So that was a very impactful book for me, and just figuring that out. So we're
awesome.
Still learning, trying to figure that out.
It is amazing. Like, it's the power of your network.
Yeah.
Has such an impact on your career, has such an impact on preparing for a recession.
Yeah. So it's we'll see. We'll see how this thing is going to shake out, but it's interesting for sure. I don't know. that may be a whole other conversation we can have.
Well, how about this? This is the new question I've been asking all the listeners. If you can go back in your career with everything that you know, everything that you've experienced, and talk to yourself, what would you tell yourself about your career? And what advice would you give to yourself?
Sheesh. I would definitely tell myself to stick with the agency a little bit longer and build that network a lot more then. Because probably at that time, I was still, we were still dialing for dollars. It was the computer was just a place that you just captured the information. It wasn't necessarily the end all for everything else. But I would definitely tell myself to just kind of, hang in through some of the BS that you deal with the agencies, and then, go build your network, build your client base there, so that when you leave, you don't need them anymore, because you'd have your own network, you'd have all of your own clients, and you can do the same thing. Because, we both know staffing industry it's a $46-48 billion a year industry. There's money to be made out there. And so, yeah, that's what I would have told myself back
Awesome.
then. It's like, just hang in there. Don't leave that. Corporate sounds nice and it's cool. And it's, and I take nothing from I learned so much at Accenture, and Accenture taught me a lot. I think I needed that at Accenture when I was there. But if I could go back and mentor myself through all of that, there would have been found this guy, Benjamin Mena, coming up from Florida. Hey, buddy, I got this staffing agency. I'm running over here.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Well, 2 last questions.
Yes.
What's the future of diversity and inclusion recruiting?
I think it's going to get bigger, and it's going to be more difficult, because it's going to be bigger because people are demanding it, and it's going to be more difficult because people are demanding it on both sides. You have companies and corporations that want to have that either really want to have an impact or they want to be able to show that they're diverse in nature. The difference now is that, kind of as we mentioned before, the kids coming out of college now, they're a lot more serious about being what you say you are. Like if you aren't able to show and do, how are you going to train me? How are you going to empower me? How are you going to support me? How are you going to do these things? Because if I can't see it in the people you're doing it now, you're not going to do it when I get there. And then if I do believe you and get in there and it's not what it is, they're going to go.
Peace.
They're going to go. The years of people who just stick out jobs just because are it's go. That's over with. Between COVID and the remote ability and people doing that, companies got to realize it's not a company market to hiring candidates. Like it's a candidates market out there, especially now because unemployment is not low. People got jobs. It's like, okay, people will walk away from you and no problem. So
they'll walk away, and then 1 million people will see the video on TikTok.
Right. And they're getting, it's not the same. Employers cannot be arrogant about their hiring tactics anymore. They can't. This is not, look at this little bit of food, or look at this little bit of crumbs that we're giving you, and you should be thankful that you have that. It's no, like, you show me. I'm a brand, you're a brand. How are we going to work together? And that's and I think a lot more candidates are catching on to that. And so I think, I hope that a lot of companies take DEI and B a lot more serious, and that we're able to kind of expand, because it does. I mean, diverse organizations it's been proven through numbers and through metrics are more productive, more, they make more money, and it retains more talent, and it makes talent grow more. And they're just better organizations for it. So
awesome. Well, before we let you go, is there anything else that you'd love to share with the listeners?
No, thank you, man. I appreciate you having me on. I'm always passionate to talk about whether it's DEI and B or recruiting or anything. We can sit down and talk about anything and go wall to wall. So it's good. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, we'll definitely have you back on again. But James, definitely thank you for joining us today. And for the listeners, until next time.